They called her delusional. A woman with no vision, no sophistication, no future. Diana Monroe spent 8 years watching less qualified men climb over her to reach the top while she remained invisible, trapped in a cubicle despite having an MBA and flawless performance reviews. Then came the day that changed everything. In front of 200 employees, her CEO didn't just deny her a promotion. He publicly humiliated her, claiming she would never amount to anything in the corporate world. The position went to a 28-year-old who had been copying her work for months. When Diana discovered proof that this golden boy had stolen her revolutionary investment algorithm, the same algorithm now generating millions for the company, she thought justice would finally prevail. She was wrong. Her boss refused to even look at the evidence before firing her on the spot and having her escorted out by security. That should have been the end of Diana Monroe's story. A cautionary tale about workplace discrimination and corporate theft. But what happened next defied every expectation. With just $3,000 to her name and 30 days before eviction, Diana made a desperate gamble that would either destroy her completely or change everything. While her former colleagues celebrated their success with her stolen work, she was quietly building something that would make their achievements look like pocket change. 18 months later, Diana would walk back into that same building wearing a $2,000 suit, carrying legal documents that would turn her former boss into her employee. The woman they had dismissed as worthless was about to buy the entire company and serve the most expensive lesson in corporate karma ever witnessed. This is the story of how a simple woman proved that the biggest mistake you can make is underestimating someone with nothing left to lose. Diana Monroe sat in the back row of the conference room, her fingers nervously tapping against her worn leather portfolio. 8 years. 8 long years she had given to Preston Financial Solutions. And here she was, still watching promotions pass her by like she was invisible. The mahogany conference table stretched before her, filled with executives in expensive suits who barely acknowledged her existence. Diana clutched the proposal that had kept her awake for months. A revolutionary investment algorithm that could predict market movements with 94% accuracy. Today was supposed to be her day. Today, Victor Blackstone would finally see her worth. Victor strode into the room like he owned the world, and technically, he did own this corner of it. At 52, the CEO of Preston Financial commanded respect through intimidation rather than inspiration. His silver hair was perfectly styled, his suit cost more than Diana made in 3 months, and his cold blue eyes scanned the room like a predator sizing up prey. Ladies and gentlemen, Victor's voice boomed across the conference room. Today we're making some important changes to our leadership structure. Diana's heart raced. This was it. After years of being overlooked, after countless late nights perfecting her algorithm, after watching less qualified colleagues climb the ladder while she remained stuck in her cubicle, this was her moment. As you know, our analytics department has been performing exceptionally well this quarter, Victor continued, his gaze sweeping past Diana without pause. Which is why I'm promoting someone who truly understands the vision and sophistication required for leadership in this company. The words hit Diana like a physical blow. Vision and sophistication. She had both in spades, plus an MBA from Northwestern and 8 years of flawless performance reviews. Her algorithm had already proven its worth in preliminary tests, generating returns that made the senior analysts whistle in amazement. Trevor Mitchell, Victor announced with a broad smile, stepped forward. The room erupted in polite applause as Trevor rose from his seat near the front. 28 years old, Harvard MBA, and exactly 18 months of experience at Preston Financial. Diana watched in horror as this man, this boy who still asked her to explain basic market principles, walked to the front of the room to accept the position she had earned 10 times over. Trevor's handshake with Victor lasted longer than any conversation Diana had ever had with the CEO. The injustice burned in her chest like acid, but she forced herself to remain composed. Professional. Invisible, just like always. Trevor brings fresh perspective and innovative thinking to our team, Victor declared, his arm around Trevor's shoulders like a proud father. He understands what it takes to move this company forward into the future. Diana bit her tongue so hard she tasted blood. Fresh perspective? Trevor had been copying her strategies for months, always conveniently forgetting to credit her contributions during team meetings. Innovative thinking? The man could barely operate the coffee machine without instructions. But the real knife to her heart came next. Now, I know some of you might be wondering about other candidates for this position. Victor's eyes finally landed on Diana, and she felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes following his gaze. Let me be crystal clear about something. Not everyone in this company has what it takes for leadership. Some people, despite their efforts, simply lack the vision and sophistication required for executive roles. The conference room fell silent. Diana felt her cheeks burn with humiliation as Victor's words echoed off the walls. He wasn't just denying her the promotion. He was publicly destroying her credibility in front of every important person in the company. Experience alone doesn't qualify someone for advancement, Victor continued, his voice carrying that patronizing tone that made Diana's skin crawl. We need leaders who can think beyond spreadsheets and data points. We need people who understand the bigger picture. Trevor nodded sagely, as if he hadn't spent the last 6 months asking Diana to explain those very spreadsheets and data points to him. The hypocrisy was suffocating. Diana wanted to stand up. She wanted to scream about her algorithm, about her late nights, about the clients she had saved with her analysis. She wanted to tell everyone in that room that Trevor's innovative strategies were actually her work, stolen and repackaged with his name on top. Instead, she sat there, frozen by years of being taught to be grateful for whatever scraps of recognition came her way. Her portfolio felt heavy in her hands, filled with documentation of her achievements that apparently meant nothing to the man who controlled her future. The meeting dragged on for another 40 minutes. Diana watched as Victor outlined Trevor's new responsibilities, many of which involved projects she had initiated. She listened as colleagues congratulated Trevor on his well-deserved promotion, the same colleagues who had witnessed her doing the actual work. When the meeting finally ended, Diana remained in her seat as the room emptied around her. Trevor approached her table with what he probably thought was a humble expression. "Hey Diana, I hope there are no hard feelings," he said, straightening his tie. "I know you were hoping for this position, but sometimes these things just work out differently." She looked up at him, this privileged, underqualified man who had just been handed her dream job, and managed to nod politely. "I'm sure you'll do great," she lied, the words tasting like poison. "Actually, I was hoping you could help me transition into the role," Trevor continued, apparently oblivious to the absurdity of his request. "You know the accounts better than anyone, and I could really use your support." The audacity was breathtaking. He wanted her to train him for the job she should have received. He wanted her to smile and be grateful for the opportunity to serve the man who had stolen her future. Diana gathered her portfolio and stood up slowly. 8 years of swallowed pride, 8 years of being the perfect team player, 8 years of believing that hard work and talent would eventually be rewarded. All of it crystallized into this moment of perfect, devastating clarity. She was never going to advance at Preston Financial. Not because she lacked skill or vision or sophistication, but because Victor Blackstone had already decided who belonged in his inner circle, and people like Diana Monroe, brilliant, hardworking, and inconveniently honest, would never make the cut. "I'll think about it," she told Trevor, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her chest. As she walked out of that conference room, Diana had no idea that this moment of humiliation would become the catalyst for the most spectacular revenge story in corporate history. She had no idea that within 2 years, she would own the company that had just rejected her. All she knew was that something fundamental had shifted inside her. The Diana Monroe who had walked into that meeting, eager, hopeful, still believing in fairness, was gone forever. What emerged in her place was something far more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose. 3 weeks after the humiliation, Diana sat in her cramped studio apartment staring at the eviction notice taped to her door. 30 days to pay 3 months of back rent, or she would be out on the street. The irony wasn't lost on her. While Trevor was celebrating his new 6-figure salary with expensive dinners, she couldn't even afford groceries. But Diana had discovered something that made her blood boil even hotter than the eviction notice. She had proof that Trevor Mitchell was a thief. It started innocently enough. Diana had been cleaning out her work computer before returning it to HR when she noticed something odd in the shared drive. Trevor's revolutionary investment proposal, the one that had supposedly earned him the promotion, had a familiar ring to it. Too familiar. She opened the document and felt her world tilt sideways. Every formula, every projection, every innovative strategy that Victor had praised Trevor for was lifted directly from Diana's algorithm. Not inspired by it. Not based on it. Stolen, word for word, number for number. The timestamps told the whole story. Diana's original files dated back 14 months. Trevor's proposal was created just 6 weeks ago, 2 days after she had shared her algorithm with the analytics team for feedback. He had literally copied her work, changed the header to his name, and presented it as his own genius. Diana spent the next 72 hours building an airtight case. She gathered email threads, version histories, witness testimonies from colleagues who remembered her presenting the concepts months earlier. She documented every instance where Trevor had asked her to explain his own strategies, every meeting where he stumbled over basic questions about the algorithm he claimed to have created. Armed with enough evidence to destroy Trevor's career and expose Victor's incompetence, Diana marched into Preston Financial's headquarters one last time. She bypassed the receptionist, ignored the security guard's protests, and walked straight into Victor's corner office. Victor looked up from his mahogany desk with the expression of a man swatting an annoying fly. "Diana, what are you doing here? You don't work here anymore, remember?" His voice dripped with condescension. "I have something you need to see," Diana said, placing a thick folder on his desk. "Proof that Trevor Mitchell stole my investment algorithm. The same algorithm that's currently generating millions for this company." Victor didn't even open the folder. He leaned back in his leather chair and laughed, actually laughed, at her desperation. "Do you hear yourself right now? You're claiming that Trevor stole your work? Trevor Mitchell, Harvard MBA, one of the brightest minds I've ever recruited." Victor shook his head like he was dealing with a delusional child. "This is exactly why you'll never make it in this business, Diana. You can't accept that some people are simply better than you. Look at the evidence," Diana insisted, her voice rising despite her efforts to stay calm. "The timestamps, the email trails, everything is documented right there." "I don't need to look at anything," Victor snapped, standing up to tower over her. "I know quality when I see it, and Trevor's work speaks for itself. What I'm seeing right now is a bitter, unsuccessful woman who can't handle being passed over for someone more qualified." The dismissal hit Diana like a slap. Here she was, offering Victor proof that his golden boy was a fraud, and he wouldn't even dignify her with a glance at the evidence. "You're making a mistake," Diana said quietly. "That algorithm is mine. I can prove it. Get out." Victor's voice turned ice cold. "Get out of my office, get out of my building, and if I ever see you here again, I'll have you arrested for trespassing." "Security." 2 guards appeared in the doorway, as if they had been waiting for this moment. Diana clutched her folder of evidence, useless, ignored evidence, as they escorted her through the office where her former colleagues averted their eyes in embarrassment. "And Diana," Victor called after her, his voice carrying across the entire floor, "stop living in fantasy land. Some people have what it takes, and some people don't. The sooner you accept which category you belong in, the better off you'll be." The words followed Diana all the way to the elevator, burned into her memory like a brand. As the doors closed on Preston Financial forever, she made a promise to herself. Victor Blackstone would eat those words. But first, she had to survive the next 30 days. Diana returned to her apartment and spread her remaining $3,000 across her kitchen table. It was everything she had left after months of unemployment: her emergency fund, her security deposit return, even the cash she kept hidden in her jewelry box. $3,000 stood between her and homelessness. Most people in her situation would use that money for rent, for food, for basic survival. Diana Monroe was not most people. She opened her laptop and logged into her cryptocurrency trading account. If Victor wanted to call her delusional, she would show him what delusion could accomplish. Her algorithm had been generating millions for Preston Financial using traditional investments. But in the volatile world of cryptocurrency, with proper leverage and timing, it could work miracles. Diana spent the next 18 hours adapting her algorithm for crypto markets. She factored in blockchain patterns, social media sentiment, and regulatory news cycles. By dawn, she had created something that no hedge fund manager in the world possessed: a cryptocurrency prediction model with unprecedented accuracy. At exactly 9 a.m. on Monday morning, Diana placed her first trade: $3,000 on a combination of Bitcoin, Ethereum, and 3 smaller altcoins that her algorithm had identified as undervalued. Then she sat back and watched her life savings disappear into the digital ether. For the first week, nothing happened. The markets moved sideways, and Diana's investment stayed roughly flat. She ate ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, checking her portfolio every 10 minutes like an addict. Then something beautiful happened. Bitcoin surged 12% overnight on news that Diana's algorithm had predicted 3 days earlier. Her Ethereum position exploded when a major tech company announced blockchain integration, exactly the kind of corporate adoption her model had forecasted. The smaller altcoins, dismissed by most traders as worthless, suddenly became the darlings of social media influencers. By the end of the first month, Diana's 3,000 had become 30,000. She paid her rent, bought real food, and reinvested the rest. Month 2 brought even bigger gains. Her algorithm was learning, adapting, becoming more precise with each trade. Diana discovered patterns in cryptocurrency markets that institutional investors were completely missing. While they relied on traditional analysis, she was reading the blockchain like a roadmap to the future. 60,000 became 120,000, then 200,000, then 500,000. Diana moved to a better apartment, bought herself a proper computer setup, and for the first time in years, allowed herself to dream big. But she never forgot the taste of humiliation in Victor's office, never stopped thinking about Trevor stealing credit for her work. Meanwhile, across town at Preston Financial, cracks were beginning to show. Trevor Mitchell, the golden boy who was supposed to revolutionize their investment strategy, was making catastrophic mistakes. Without Diana to quietly fix his errors, without her algorithm to guide his decisions, he was exposed as exactly what she had always known him to be, a fraud. Client after client began pulling their money as Trevor's investments turned sour. The algorithm he had stolen was like a Ferrari in the hands of someone who had never learned to drive. He had the blueprint but none of the understanding, the formula but none of the insight that made it work. Victor, meanwhile, remained obliviously confident in his golden boy. Even as clients complained about losses, even as other firms began poaching Preston Financial's biggest accounts, he refused to admit that Trevor might be in over his head. Market volatility, Victor would tell concerned investors. Every firm is struggling right now. Trevor's strategies are sound. We just need to weather the storm. But Diana knew better. She had been monitoring Preston Financial's public filings, watching their quarterly reports with the keen interest of someone who understood exactly what was going wrong. Trevor was using her algorithm like a cookbook without understanding the ingredients. He was following the steps but missing the science behind them. By month 6, Diana's portfolio had grown to $5 million. She was making more in a single day than she had earned in entire years at Preston Financial. But money wasn't her primary motivation anymore. It was just the tool she needed for something much more satisfying. She began researching Preston Financial's corporate structure, their debt obligations, their major creditors. What she discovered made her smile for the first time since that humiliating day in the conference room. Victor Blackstone's empire was built on quicksand, and Diana Monroe was about to become the earthquake that brought it all crashing down. She picked up her phone and dialed the number for Morrison Capital, Preston Financial's largest creditor. It was time to have a very interesting conversation about corporate debt acquisition. The woman who had been dismissed as lacking vision and sophistication was about to teach Victor Blackstone the most expensive lesson of his life. And Trevor Mitchell, the thief who had stolen her future, was about to discover that karma had a compound interest rate that would make even the best algorithm weep. 18 months after Victor Blackstone had called her delusional, Diana Monroe owned his company. She had done it quietly, methodically, like the analyst she had always been. While her cryptocurrency portfolio exploded to $50 million, Preston Financial hemorrhaged money at an alarming rate. Trevor's incompetence with her stolen algorithm had cost the company 3 major clients, $12 million in losses, and their reputation in the industry. Diana had watched it all unfold from the shadows, her network of contacts feeding her insider information about Preston Financial's descent into chaos. Former colleagues, still bitter about their own treatment under Victor's leadership, were surprisingly willing to share details about the company's mounting debts and client defections. The final piece of her plan had come together 3 weeks ago when Morrison Capital, Preston Financial's largest creditor, approached her with an unusual proposition. They knew about her trading success. $50 million in gains doesn't go unnoticed in financial circles, and they needed someone with serious capital to take a problematic debt off their hands. Preston Financial owed Morrison Capital $23 million. Victor had been making minimum payments for months, barely keeping his company afloat, while Trevor continued to lose client money with his butchered version of Diana's algorithm. Morrison Capital wanted out of the loan entirely, and they were willing to sell the debt for $12 million to anyone brave enough to collect it. Diana had smiled when they offered her the deal. $12 million to own Victor Blackstone's soul? It was the bargain of the century. Now she stood outside the Preston Financial building, holding the legal documents that made her the company's primary creditor. Victor didn't know it yet, but he had exactly 72 hours to pay her $23 million or surrender controlling interest in his company. The same company that had rejected her, humiliated her, and stolen her work. Diana's lawyer, Patricia Hendricks, had been very clear about the legal implications. "You're not just buying debt," Patricia had explained during their meeting. "You're buying power. If they can't pay, and based on their financial statements they can't, you can seize assets, demand board seats, even force a complete restructuring of the company." Diana had listened to every word, but her mind was elsewhere. She was thinking about Victor's condescending smile, about Trevor's smug handshake, about the 200 people who had watched her public humiliation in that conference room. Today, she would walk back into that same room as the person who controlled their futures. The receptionist's eyes widened when Diana approached the front desk. "Ms. Monroe? I haven't seen you since." "I'm here to see Victor Blackstone," Diana said calmly. "Tell him Diana Monroe is here about the Morrison Capital debt transfer." 5 minutes later, Diana was riding the elevator to the executive floor, the same elevator that had carried her down in shame 18 months ago. But everything was different now. Her $3,000 emergency fund had become $50 million in assets. Her desperation had transformed into unshakable confidence. Most importantly, she was no longer the victim in this story. Victor's assistant, Margaret, looked confused when Diana emerged from the elevator. "Ms. Monroe, Mr. Blackstone is in a board meeting right now. Perhaps I could schedule you for later this week." "The board meeting is exactly where I need to be," Diana replied, walking past Margaret toward the conference room. "Trust me, they'll want to hear what I have to say." She pushed open the conference room doors and stepped into the scene of her greatest humiliation. The same mahogany table, the same expensive suits, even some of the same faces that had witnessed her public destruction. But this time, Diana wasn't sitting in the back row. This time she commanded the room. Victor looked up from his presentation with the expression of a man seeing a ghost. "Diana, what the hell are you doing here?" "Margaret, call security." "I wouldn't do that if I were you," Diana said, placing her leather portfolio on the table. "Not unless you want your security team to forcibly remove your company's new majority creditor." The room fell silent. Trevor, who had been taking notes at Victor's right hand, suddenly looked very pale. Board members exchanged confused glances, unsure what was happening but sensing the shift in power dynamics. Victor laughed, but it sounded forced. "What are you talking about? Have you completely lost your mind?" Diana opened her portfolio and spread the legal documents across the table. Debt transfer agreements, payment schedules, default notices, all bearing the official seals and signatures that made them legally binding. "As of yesterday, I own the $23 million debt that Preston Financial owes to Morrison Capital," Diana announced. "According to the terms of your original loan agreement, you have 72 hours to pay the full amount, or I can seize company assets and demand controlling interest in the business." The color drained from Victor's face. He grabbed the documents with shaking hands, scanning them for any sign that this was an elaborate prank. But the legal language was crystal clear. The signatures were authentic, and the reality was inescapable. "This is impossible," Victor whispered. "You're unemployed. You don't have this kind of money." "Unemployed?" Diana smiled. "I've been running my own investment firm for the past 18 months. Turns out, when you actually understand the algorithm instead of just stealing it, you can make quite a lot of money." Trevor made a choking sound. Several board members turned to stare at him, putting together pieces of a puzzle they hadn't realized existed. "That's right, Trevor," Diana continued, her voice growing stronger. "Remember my algorithm? The one you copied and claimed as your own? The one that earned you this promotion? I've been using the real version, the one that actually works, to build a $50 million portfolio while you've been destroying this company with your incompetent attempts to implement something you never understood." "You can't prove that," Trevor stammered, but his face had gone from pale to green. Diana pulled out her phone and projected her screen onto the conference room's display. Email after email appeared, showing Trevor asking for clarification on his algorithm, begging Diana to explain basic concepts, even requesting help with calculations that any competent analyst should have been able to handle. 14 months of documentation, Diana said. Every time you came to me for help understanding your own supposed creation. Every email where you admitted you couldn't make the projections work. Every meeting where you stumbled over questions about the strategy you claimed to have developed. Board member Patricia Coleman leaned forward. Victor, is this true? Did Trevor steal this woman's work? It's not theft, Victor said desperately. It's collaboration. Team effort. Diana is clearly having some kind of mental breakdown and… Mental breakdown? Diana's voice cut through his excuses like a blade. Is that what you call turning $3,000 into $50 million? Is that what you call building a more successful investment strategy than your entire firm? She clicked to another screen showing her portfolio performance. The numbers spoke for themselves. Consistent gains, minimal losses, returns that made even the most successful hedge funds look mediocre. While Trevor was losing your client's money with his butchered version of my algorithm, I was using the real version to outperform every major investment firm in the city, Diana continued. And now, with the legal authority I've purchased, I'm here to make you an offer. Victor's hands were visibly shaking now. What kind of offer? Diana smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. The same kind of offer you made me 18 months ago. The same kind of consideration you showed me when I brought you evidence of Trevor's theft. She walked to the head of the table, the same spot where Victor had announced Trevor's promotion and her humiliation. The symbolism wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Victor Blackstone, Diana said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who held his company's fate in her hands. You have a choice. You can pay me $23 million in the next 72 hours, or you can accept my alternative proposal. What proposal? Victor asked, though he clearly dreaded the answer. You can work for me, Diana said simply. Minimum wage. 40 hours a week. Cleaning floors, emptying trash cans, doing all the jobs that people like you think are beneath your dignity. In exchange, I'll keep the company running and won't fire the 200 employees whose livelihoods depend on Preston Financial staying afloat. The room erupted. Board members shouted questions. Trevor looked like he might faint, and Victor's face cycled through approximately 7 different shades of red. You can't be serious, Victor gasped. This is extortion. This is business, Diana corrected. The same kind of business you practiced when you publicly humiliated me for lacking vision and sophistication. The same kind of business that kept me trapped in entry-level positions while less qualified people advanced around me. The same kind of business that refused to even look at evidence when I tried to report Trevor's theft. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Trevor, of course, is fired immediately. Intellectual property theft is grounds for termination and possible criminal charges. I'll be generous and merely destroy his career instead of putting him in prison. Trevor bolted from his chair and ran from the room. His footsteps echoed down the hallway as he fled the consequences of his actions, finally exposed for what he had always been. Diana turned back to Victor, who was slumped in his chair like a deflated balloon. So what's it going to be, Victor? $23 million you don't have, or a custodial position with the woman you once called delusional. Victor looked around the table at his board members, searching for support that wasn't coming. They had all heard the evidence, seen the documentation, witnessed the stunning reversal of fortune that had just unfolded. I need time to think, Victor said weakly. You have 72 hours, Diana replied, gathering her documents. Same deadline as the original loan terms. But Victor, let me give you some free advice, since you clearly need it. She leaned across the table until she was face to face with the man who had destroyed her dignity in this very room. Some people have what it takes, and some people don't. The sooner you accept which category you belong in, the better off you'll be. Diana walked out of the Preston Financial building for the second time in 18 months. But this time she owned it. 3 days later, Victor Blackstone reported for his first shift as a custodial worker at Preston Financial Solutions. He wore a company uniform with his name embroidered on the chest, carried a mop and bucket, and answered to Diana Monroe, the woman whose vision and sophistication had just saved his company from bankruptcy. The algorithm that had started this entire chain of events? It became the foundation of Monroe Capital Management, now one of the most successful investment firms in the country. Diana hired back every talented employee that Victor had overlooked, promoted based on merit instead of politics, and transformed Preston Financial into the most profitable subsidiary of her growing empire. And Trevor Mitchell? He never worked in finance again. Turns out, when word spreads about intellectual property theft, even Harvard MBAs can find themselves unemployable. Last anyone heard, he was selling insurance in a strip mall in New Jersey, still trying to explain to potential clients how his revolutionary investment strategies could help them build wealth. As for Diana, she kept the original algorithm that had started everything framed on her office wall. Right next to it hung a photo from that day in the conference room. Not the moment of her humiliation, but the moment of her triumph. The moment when a simple woman proved that vision and sophistication aren't determined by who you know or where you went to school. They're determined by what you do when everyone tells you that you'll never make it. Diana Monroe had made it, all right. She had made it all the way to the top of the company that had once rejected her. And from her corner office, she had a perfect view of Victor Blackstone emptying wastebaskets in the cubicles below. Some people call it revenge. Diana preferred to think of it as justice with compound interest.